Hello, my name is Amanda. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I spent the month of June teaching in the classroom and online at the same time to two different groups of students. And this is just my reflection back on that time. I teach grade 1 to French Immersion. So online learning was an interesting adventure, trying to teach an additional language to students in a setting that isn't French immersion. There were a few concerns that came up just from parents not knowing how to support their students in a language that the parents didn't speak. So there were more students that came back to the French immersion classes than some of the English classes in our school. So I have 19 students. From those 19, 10 of them came back to the classroom in June on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And then the other 9 continued with online learning Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So there was no crossover at this point. So if a student was in person, then they weren't participating in any of our online activities. And likewise, those who continued with online knew that they were going to get less time from me because I was now in the classroom. So I had group 1, like pretty much my class was split in 2. Group 1 was in person Tuesday, Thursday. Group 2 was online Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So for me, for planning, I was still filming videos, and really the activities I did in person were heavily influenced by what I was continuing to teach online. So I have a couple different topics to get to. Classroom setup being number 1. So students weren't required to be 6 feet apart. Our focus was on no physical contact instead of physical distancing. So when I was setting up my room, I have 4 rectangular tables, and typically 19 students would sit at these 4 tables. But now I only had 10 students coming back, so at each rectangular table there were 2 students. And with our table, there was a strip of tape in the middle. So each student had their own zone. So we tried to keep them spaced out as much as we could, but it was physically impossible to get 10 kids 6 feet apart in the classroom. So much so that one student had to be a part of another class because our caps were 50%. So if I was over 50% of the students in my room coming back, then those extras had to be moved around elsewhere. So I had 19 total, 10 coming back. That's over my 50%. So one of them, they volunteered, like the one student, they volunteered to go be a part of another class because their friends were there. So that worked out well. Otherwise, we would have just rotated through which student goes elsewhere for a day. Anyway, so classroom setup, all of my furniture I gathered together, pushed to the one corner of the room so that we could have the spacing possible. I put all of the toys away because I would have had to clean the toys and sanitize the toys at least once a day, and I didn't want to do that. So the toys went away. Each kid had their own supplies, but I'll get to that in a minute. So I did tape off a zone around our sink. Thankfully, we have a sink in our room, so that was taped off. And then there was 2 meters of space between like the kids when they would line up to wash their hands. But that's really the big change. Like all of my stuff was pushed, the class library was closed, the toys were closed down. like all of our manipulatives were put away. It was really just the tables, the chairs for 10 kids. And so because I had 2 at each table, I had to bring in 1 individual desk. And there was a student who wanted to be by themselves at this desk, so that worked out well for us as well. Okay, the next thing is the hand washing. So day 1, hand washing took up way more time than anticipated. We started tallying how many times we were washing our hands, and we lost count because I forgot to keep tallying. But students would wash their hands upon entering the classroom, leaving the classroom, before and after eating. Anytime they would touch their face or sneeze or any of that, they had to wash their hands as well. I believe those were the main times they had to wash. And students still didn't know how to wash their hands, so we watched a couple of videos of how to wash our hands, and I would stand as far away from them as possible while still being close enough to give them instructions of what to do to wash their hands. One thing they really struggled with is they would get their soap, or like they would turn on the sink, they would get their soap, they would wash, and then they're supposed to go dry their hands and then come back with that paper towel to turn off the sink, but they would turn off the sink first, and then we had to wash our hands again because they just touched the sink with clean hands. So hand washing, plan for that to take up a lot of time. Even by the end of the month, like, I was still supervising hand washing. Washrooms was another change for them as well, because we could only have 2 kids in the washroom at a time, and we don't have washrooms in our class. So we were lucky that we had educational assistants in our classes, and so anytime a student had to go to the washroom, our EA would go with them and just holler into the washroom, "Hey, is anyone in there?" Just to make sure that they were able to keep their distancing. Okay, so coming back to the toys, so we aren't allowed to have any soft toys. Like, I could have kept out toys, but we would have had to wash them 1 to 2 times a day, and that is just not something I wanted to do. So I thought it was easier to just pack up all the toys. And initially I didn't leave any toys in like individual student kits for them to play with, which is fine. What they did end up using were the centimeter cubes, which are sort of like snap cubes. They were just little ones. So I gave them a bunch of those, and we used them for math, but then they enjoyed playing with those. Otherwise, they were doing a lot of coloring and a lot of drawing, and they were getting tired of all the coloring and drawing. So for September, I'm working on some storytelling tubs, which I'm going to be using in my classroom anyways, but I wanted to have something a bit more playful, more intentionally playful, that students can have, like, to play by themselves. So that's something I'm working on. We're not allowed to have any like soft things either, or things that are difficult to clean. So storytelling tubs, and I'll make a separate video with those because I love them, and I think the students will love them too. It's sort of like loose parts, but again with a bit more structure to it. We were so lucky that the second week of June, the playgrounds were open. So we took advantage of that. We scheduled in extra recess times so we could get outside and play on the playground more frequently. And like even their mental health, I noticed, like, improved a lot by being able to get out and play. That first week was tough. I had a lot of students who were missing their families and were just nervous. Like, I was nervous, and so there were like quite a few tears that first week, and like for some students that continued through to the end of June, but for others, like once they got a bit more used to their routine and feeling a bit more comfortable at school, then like emotionally they were able to like self-soothe a bit better. But that first week was heartbreaking because some of these kids, like, they just wanted a hug, and because we can't give hugs, we would just say, okay, un câlin à distance ou un câlin de loin. So like a distanced hug. And so these little ones were just like hugging themselves and squeezing themselves, which was precious, but also heartbreaking. So the mental health side is something I want to be more informed about for September, and I'm hopeful that our district is moving in that direction as well, because everything was just week to week, and so there's no time for all this additional training when the big focus was the cleanliness, like the safety, like the physical safety. So I'm hopeful that we'll focus a bit more on the mental health safety for the fall. I do have one of my books here is a trauma stewardship book, just so I'm able to know a bit more about supporting these little ones while I'm also learning how to deal with the stress and anxiety of a challenging situation. Okay, the next thing I wanted to talk about is like, what did we do all day? That was like, I do appreciate having the time in June to see what the school day would look like, so I can better know how much time to dedicate for certain things, because our day like completely changed completely. So students would come in at 8:30. Our day is 8:30 to 2:38. So we had, from our students in the entire school, they were split into 2 groups by last name, and so one group would show up at 8:30 and the second group would show up at 8:40, and then we would have our announcements and like all of that morning welcome at about 8:50. So pretty much the first half hour, 40 minutes of the day was just individual time. I put out new coloring sheets for students almost each day, so they could color, they could chat with their friends. We had some books in their book bins that they could look through, like they're just some simple activities they could pick from their bins, and I'll talk about the bins. So each student, they had their own, like it was their book bin and now it's their supply bin, and in it there was like markers, crayons, paper, journal, a clipboard, some centimeter cubes, some math counters, like pencil and individual sharpener, just like things like that. And so when they came in for their independent time, like they could just pick what they wanted to do. Then we would do a little bit of math. We put maybe about half an hour for math, where I would do a lesson that was the same as what our online students were doing, and then we would do some practice, which was also the same, and that would take us to about 9:30. 9:30 we would wash our hands for our snack. So normally for snack we would have about 15 minutes, but I planned for 20 to 25 just because of the hand washing. So we would wash our hands, have our snack, wash our hands again, go outside for recess. And the school, there were 2 recess groups, so we were the first group outside, and we would go for recess. When we came in at about 10:15, then there was a 5-minute gap before the next group went outside. So when that second group was outside, I tried doing read alouds, but they were like, the noise outside was distracting. So instead we had another 20 or so minutes of independent time. Then we did, normally it was like a a read aloud, which is the same as what I would do for the online students. Then we went outside for our second bonus recess, we called it, and it was often just our class, and so we would go outside for another 20 minutes or so. We were back in typically around 11:30, which gave us half an hour to do some journaling or a directed drawing before getting ready for lunch. Then lunch is 12 to 1, which left us with an hour and a half at the end of the day. And in that hour and a half, again, we did some independent time with like the lights dimmed, some music playing. We did some phonics games. A lot of our phonics work was in the afternoon, and that worked out well. Like, I had a story to go with our sound because our program is Raconte-moi les sons. So we would do the story, some activities, then they had like an activity booklet to practice the sound, and we played some games as well. So the group that showed up at 8:30 in the morning, the first group, they would leave at 2:28, and then the second group would leave at 2:38. So at the end of the day, we try to all get ready at the same time and all be outside playing. It just made it easier because the last group there was 3 kids that would have to wait like an extra 10 minutes with me while everyone else left. Like, it was sad. So we ended up spending a lot of time outside. So that's pretty much what that looked like. In terms of prep, I didn't have prep when I was in person. I was told to assign myself prep when I was working from home on the Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So I would just do that, and it worked out fine for me. Yeah, I found June I had a better pace for myself, whereas when everything was online, it was just go, 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 and a lot of screen time, and it was exhausting. And like, June was exhausting as well, but in a different kind of way. So to end, like, my big tip is just take it slow. Like, the routine is going to take time, and like, it's worth just spending that extra time to go through every little detail of every little routine, for your sanity, but also for the students. They really needed that, and that really helped them emotionally just be ready for the day too. So those are my big things. It's just the take it slow, routine, which is similar to the start of the school year. So anyways, I hope that helped you maybe feel a bit more, not necessarily prepared, but made you a bit more aware of what you could expect going back to school. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And if no one watches this video, then this is a nice little reflection piece for me to look back on when I start getting ready for September, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what to expect? Here you go, Amanda, this is what you expect. Anyways, I'll stop there, and we'll see you soon. Au revoir!